Well, good morning, and welcome to another week of Journey with Christ. I'm your host, Mark Mitchell, preaching minister here at the Park Avenue Church of Christ in downtown Charleston, West Virginia. I am joined, as usual, by Steve Fox, a preaching minister for over 50 years. Well, how are we doing today, buddy?
I'm doing pretty good. I didn't get a lot of rest this past weekend. I do this every 4 years when the Olympics come on. I say, I'm not going to watch beach volleyball or water polo or gymnastics. And then I start looking at those athletes and see what kind of athletes they are, and I'm amazed. I mean, those are the best athletes in the world. So I didn't spend a lot of time doing it. I took a couple hours yesterday to go to church, but the rest of the time I've been laying on my bed watching the Olympics. And what really impresses me about these guys, they are the world's greatest athletes. And I did the math yesterday when they ran the final of the 800 meters. Mm-hmm. And the slowest guy in the first heat, if I had run what I ran in high school and college, he'd only beat me by 26 seconds. He just leaned at the tape and beat me by 26 seconds. But watching those guys is just amazing. And since I can't run now anymore, it's really special to watch athletes like that do what they do best.
There is, and you appreciate several factors of their tenacity, the devotion they put to their training. And I mean, I know that in the big scheme of things, athletics, when it comes right down to it, it's not one of the top 5 elements of our society, but it does teach us lessons, and they're very good in what they do and what they can accomplish. And you're right, they're fun to watch.
Looking at my own individual life, I can't believe what I would be if you took away everything from me that I learned from sports.
Yes.
Or I learned from coaches that I just greatly respected.
There is a tremendous amount of life lessons that comes out of athletics. The sad part about it, if you get right down to it, it's too bad that that's where most of our kids are getting their best life lessons is in sports. Mm-hmm. Because we know that if we were reading our Bible, we could get those same lessons, but in a verbal way. But what happens in sports is you get it in a real life lesson, and sometimes those are really the best lessons.
Yeah, that's true. Well, that's what I did mostly for the past 4 days, and will probably do for the next 4 days, 4 or 5 days.
Yeah.
I even have Susie in there watching it.
Oh, good deal. Well, we better get on to our parable. For those of you, I know you saw last week that I said because of technical difficulties that Steve and I did this last week. But the problem was about halfway through the video recording, the sound went haywire, and all it sounded like was crumpled paper the entire time. I couldn't.
Which made more sense than what we did the week before.
It probably was been better off go ahead and giving it to them, because at least our lips would have been moving and maybe stupidity wouldn't have been coming out.
There's a word for that in the entertainment world, out of sync.
Yeah. When
your lips are out of sync with your words.
Well,
but that's not in the parable. I just threw that in for extra.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we're again at Luke 18, and I'll begin reading there in verse 1 down through verse 8. The parable of the persistent widow. Then Jesus told his disciples a parable to show them that they should always pray and not give up. He said, in a certain town there was a judge who neither feared God nor cared what people thought. And there was a widow in that town who kept coming to him with the plea, "Grant me justice against my adversary." For some time he refused, but finally he said to himself, "Even though I don't fear God or care what people think, yet because this widow keeps bothering me, I will see that she gets justice so that she won't eventually come and attack me." And the Lord said, "Listen to what the unjust judge says. And will not God bring about justice for his chosen ones, who cry out to him day and night? Will he keep putting them off? I tell you, he will see that they get justice, and quickly. However, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on the earth?" I know the title of the parables is The Persistent Widow. Steve and I, as we were doing this last week, we got into this little discussion about the elements involved here, because Steve always has the question, who are you in the parable? Jesus is calling us to be the persistent widow, not to be someone who just, because the very last question, however, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on the earth? In other words, are you just going to give up? Because that is the very first question. They should always pray and not give up.
And that's the first thing that Jesus defines in the parable. They ought always to pray. Boy, that's real easy to say, but that's not easy
No,
to
it's
do.
not.
And not lose heart.
Yeah.
When was the last time somebody said, well, just hang in there, be persistent, be patient, don't lose heart, and you did it?
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of those things that the command is easy to understand, but it's something else when you try to carry it out in your everyday life. But he's talking to people here, he says, who lose heart, who give up.
Mm-hmm.
So, like you said, who am I in this parable? I'm not God. I'm not the judge.
I'm the widow who is seeking, and in the context of the video, of the parable, she's seeking justice. Which, again, I think is very important for us, because too many times people use this persistent widow parable only as a persistent prayer requirement. Keep asking God and he'll give you what you need.
Be a nag.
Yeah, be a nag.
Just keep nagging somebody.
Be a 4 or 5 year old kid who goes, "Mommy, mommy, 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 mommy."
Or daddy, daddy, daddy.
Yeah, whichever. And that's not the point either. I read this past week in one of my commentaries, and this is one of my favorite commentaries, because it uses not only the context, but it uses what the historical elements of the period of time the people would have been living in. Mm-hmm. So he's not only very good at his understanding Greek and linguistics, but he understands historical context. And justice, by far, for most people during that period of time, was one of the most major problems. In fact, Jesus says, in fact, I tell you, verse 8, I tell you, he will see that they get justice, and quickly. He reiterates this prayer that this woman had, because what is her prayer?
That he take care of this battle between the lady, the widow, and he's described as her adversary. So they've been fighting about something, and who knows how many times she's confronted somebody and said, "What do you think about this? Tell me how you would decide this." When we're not told what that conflict was, it just calls him her adversary.
Well, she went to a judge and she said to him, "Grant me justice against my adversary." Mm-hmm. So we have the widow who has a legitimate, in her sight, an adversary. And the one commentary made a very valid point that I forget because of the time period that I live in. How easy would it have been for a woman in first century Jerusalem to demand justice?
Not very. No.
What's the odds she's going to get any justice? In fact, in all probability, what is that woman going to get most of her life? Injustice.
And that's even reiterated when it tells us what the guy is like. The king
judge,
is,
yeah.
I mean the judge. The judge doesn't care what God thinks, and he doesn't care what man thinks.
People think, yeah.
So at least if he was a devout, godly man, at least I'd have a little more chance.
Yeah.
But not with
He doesn't care
with this
one
guy.
way or the
He
other.
doesn't care.
And even among the people that Jesus dealt with, the Pharisees, they were believers in God, supposedly, but their treatment of women was bad. In fact, Jesus was the first theologian, prophet, just from a humanistic standpoint, who lifted up the place of women in society.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he had several women disciples, and I know people don't like to necessarily say that, but it's actually what Mary and Martha thought they were.
Some of them were collecting money so he could continue his ministry. He didn't have any money.
He didn't have any money,
No.
and they were by far his biggest contributors. So here we have this woman in a precarious position, demanding justice from this judge against her adversary. The judge doesn't care one iota about her, but what is Jesus' point? The point is, don't give up. Keep pursuing the judge.
Or she will wear me out by her continual coming. It's not only going to be aggravating to him, the woman's going to probably get tired of it after a while. And he's saying, don't get tired of it. Just keep doing the same thing you're doing.
Well, I love his rationalization. He said, this woman's never going to quit. And what happens when she gets so frustrated that she could come after and attack me?
Mm-hmm.
So evidently, this judge is, thinking, okay, I could be walking down an alley one night and this woman just put me out of my misery here.
The word that I think of here is nuisance. She was just a nuisance. And Jesus says to her, that's okay. In the parable, he says, that's all right. You can do that. Because I don't want you to lose heart. I don't want you to quit praying. I want you to keep doing that. The description that Jesus gives is this guy doesn't fear God. He doesn't care what God thinks about him. And he doesn't regard man. He doesn't care what man thinks. Now, if you go through life not caring what God thinks about you and not caring what the human beings around you, they don't care about you either, that's a pretty bland lifestyle.
Well, I think the context, the importance of what Jesus is saying is, it's sort of like the parallel that Jesus does many times, as when it comes to God. If you evil people know how to give good gifts, how much more does your Father in heaven know how to give good gifts? Well, Jesus presents a judge who doesn't care what God thinks, doesn't care what other people think, but yet uses that parallel to say, but look at the God who is the ultimate judge, the Father. Mm-hmm. Now, he cares what you think. He cares what is right and wrong and true and just and unjust. If this unjust judge will eventually give in to justice. Now, again, I want to make sure we get this point. It's not like you can aggravate God for things that you want. But there are certain elements by which, in fact, you read the Old Testament, several times it says there, he says, what I want from my people is to seek justice and give mercy.
In the Old Testament, under the heading of justice or mercy, in the Old Testament, this lady would have gone out to the gates of the city, and they had elders that sat out there, and you're number 5, we'll take you, or you're number 7, we'll take you, and the people would give their accounts, and then the judges would, they would judge who was right and who was wrong.
There was an attempt in God's ordained law and program that in order to teach humans what was right and wrong through the law of sin and death, that justice was not only important but absolutely essential. Society cannot sustain without justice.
No.
I mean, look at the world we live in today.
If one side is winning all the arguments, if the rich are winning all the arguments, the world's going to get worse and worse and worse.
I know. We have circumstances today of chaos because justice is now almost a matter of opinion, and my justice, is different than someone else's justice, so it just depends on who you ask.
And in her case, being a lady and going out and asking the elders, with every debate, and I don't think there's an exception to this rule, with every debate, there is somebody's ignorance.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody's right and somebody's wrong. You can't have two people arguing with each other and both of them be right.
No.
And so when she goes to get what she considers to be a just hearing, she's taking a chance because, like you said a little while ago, she is a woman, and she's working with a guy who doesn't really care whether she comes back or not. And then he says, but if I don't help her, if I don't do the right thing, she's going to be a nuisance. She's going to be out there on my front door every day.
She's never going to stop. And verse 7 for me is what I read this past week was again Jesus doubling down on what was this woman was pursuing. What her persistence involved something particular that was important as far as Jesus knew about the plight of the human condition. And Jesus says, and will not God bring about justice for his chosen ones who cry out to him day and night?
Even though Jesus doesn't specifically say it in the parable, the woman was right.
The woman was right.
In the argument and in the debate, the woman was right with her adversary, or Jesus wouldn't have told her those words.
No.
When he says, hear what the unrighteous judge says, will not God vindicate his elect who cry to him day and night? Will he delay long over them? I thought about this a couple days ago. I didn't write them down because there's a whole list. In the book of Revelation, if you may remember when we studied that about 12 years ago, in the book of Revelation there are several paragraphs where people are either under the altar or they're out in the middle of the crowd saying, how long is it going to be until we're vindicated? How long is it going to be before our enemies? How long do we have to wait?
How long do we have to wait, Lord?
You talk about ought always to pray and not lose heart. That's who John was describing in the book of Revelation. These people kept saying, how long,
O Lord?
And every person on earth today could give you an example of a time
How long, O Lord?
when they said, how long have I had to deal with this?
That's right. And there is, we have the parallel of the unjust judge, and then we have Jesus bringing back in, okay, if the unjust judge will give in,
Knows how to do that. Yeah.
What will the just God do? He's going to give in too, and he reiterates to them, will not God bring about justice for his chosen ones who cry out to him day and night? Again, too many people take this persistence widow's approach and try to apply it to asking God for everything, but I think Jesus is being specific, because the word just or justice is used throughout this parable almost in every line or sentence. It's there because this is the valid point of, because I think ties back to the first question. Who is going to continue to press for justice, or are you going to get tired and give up?
Well, the judge wasn't going to do it.
Judge wasn't going to do it.
He didn't care how, he was not going to do anything in her favor, no matter how she came. And then finally, it hits him. I better do this, or she's never going to leave me alone. She's going to be knocking on my door all the time.
And imagine too, as we talked about earlier, if we as followers of Jesus Christ don't press for justice and just get tired and give up, what kind of world are we going to end up with? Again, we go to his very last question. What will I find when I come back? Will I find a people who just don't care? Will I even find faith on the earth?
And in verse 8, he uses the word speedily. I tell you, he will vindicate them speedily.
Quickly,
You
yeah.
won't have to keep waiting and then go back and keep waiting and go back again. Like you said, if it's a righteous judge, he's going to make the right call.
That's right.
And he's going to do what God expects him to do.
Yep.
So it's a rhetorical question. Will he vindicate them speedily? Yes, he will. And like you said, here's the content and the target of Jesus' parable. Nevertheless, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on the earth?
Faith in what?
I think the New Testament usually uses the word faith for trust or belief. Now, your question is, what are we trusting and what are we believing? And what did that woman trust and what did she believe?
That justice was available.
Yeah.
That justice could be hers. And I think that is the bottom line context of this particular parable. It's not about getting what you want, as far as praying to God constantly, like, hey, I want a new truck. So, I'm gonna keep praying God.
I want a 1967 convertible Mustang.
Yeah. You want baby blue, probably.
No, red.
Oh, red. Okay, red.
Like every once in a while we'll be driving and Susie will go, "There goes your car."
But the persistence by which that Jesus, not just only requiring society, but it's almost as if in his last statement he's saying, will I find my believers and followers pursuing this?
In Hebrews 11 there's a chapter that we refer to as a chapter about faith. And it gives all these examples of faith. And it uses faith in kind of a general concept. Here was a man who lived out his faith. Did he ever make a mistake? Sure he did.
Yep.
But he lived out his life by having faith in God. So when Jesus asked this question, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on the earth? I think he wants them to think, you know what, there might be a time where there isn't faith on the earth.
Yeah.
If people don't straighten up or they don't do what they're supposed to be doing in the sight of God, there will be a time when there isn't justice. There will be a time when there isn't faith.
And we know through history, throughout history, had it not been for the concepts that come out of the Sermon on the Mount, we wouldn't have any idea of what America would look like, because it would be non-existent. Because equality, justice, mercy, all those attributes, those, doing unto others, you'd have them do unto you. I mean, those concepts only came out of the teachings of Jesus Christ. Nowhere else. I mean, even the law didn't have all this.
Not all of it, no.
No, not to the extent that Jesus went. So we have as it applies constantly, especially to Matthew and Luke. Matthew does the kingdom of heaven, and Luke describes the kingdom of God. Both of them tell of a reality that's in the kingdom, and this other reality in this kingdom is it's just, and it seeks and pursues justice.
I wonder if this, I know it's just a parable, and it probably didn't happen. Jesus just made up this story to prove a point. But if the woman could have heard Jesus saying, will he find faith on the earth? Even with her persistence, she is a faithful disciple. She is a faithful person who's trying to do what's right, and in her case, get what rightly belongs to her, whatever that situation was. So when Jesus says, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on the earth? He's asking them to think, who are you in the parable?
Yeah.
Are you going to be a faith-filled person, and he can look at you and find faith on the earth? Or are you going to be a person who doesn't fear God and doesn't fear man?
Yeah. Are you going to be the person who sees this woman who desperately deserves justice from her adversary? And are you going to be someone who takes up her case with her? And maybe the both of you together can persuade that judge faster.
And can you imagine how good she felt the first morning she woke up and said, the judge has decided on my account what I said was true, and I don't have to go down there anymore.
Yeah.
Who knows how long, maybe she's going down once a week, twice a week, who knows. But she got up one morning and said, this has been taken care of.
Yes.
And it was taken care of because I prayed about it, and I didn't lose heart. So like I said a little while ago, it's real easy to say don't give up. It's real easy to say don't lose heart. It's real easy to say don't worry about it. When was the last time somebody said to you, don't worry about it, and you just stopped worrying about it?
It's a great concept, but it doesn't generally work.
It doesn't work.
I was thinking when you were doing we were talking from the beginning of it, and you were talking about the athletes. One attribute of an athlete, especially an Olympic athlete, is persistence. Because you don't ever get to that level of skill and abilities without persistence. And anything worthwhile will require a persistent mind and heart.
If you're actually thinking about the possibility of you doing something that you're watching those athletes on TV, you don't get up one morning and say, like 3 weeks before the Olympics, and say, I'm going to try that.
Yeah, I'm going to see how I can do.
And I felt so sorry, 3 years ago, or no, that was last year, when here these athletes were training for 4 years, every day, constantly. They give their life to that. They are disciplined to that one thing. And then virus came along and said, well, we can't do that.
Yeah, postponed it. Well, without a doubt.
Now also let me say, since I put my foot in my mouth there, I also greatly mourn for people who lost their loved ones during the virus. I'm not saying that sports is more important in there.
No.
But here's some people who trained every day and didn't get a chance to do it. And there are also people that would love to say, I was supposed to run on a track meet and I didn't get to do it, when they lost people in their family.
No, and we never heard any of those athletes complain about as it pertains to that. So,
no.
But we recognize, just as, there's people who lost lives, and there's also there's other degrees of suffering that people have gone through. There's people who've lost jobs, businesses. Now the process that a lot of people are complaining about is now that foreclosures, the time window's been put off on that, so now so there's going to be people who's going to lose homes over this.
And you know, what you said is exactly right. I know a little bit about Central America because of Susie and I make trips to Nicaragua all the time. Do you know how much government, okay, just take poor people who are getting evicted from their homes or evicted from their apartments. Do you know how much the government's going to give them?
Mm-mm.
Zero.
Yeah.
The government is so corrupt, it's going to take all the money that comes in there from every country, and they're going to use it for themselves. The people living in poverty who really need it, they don't see it. They don't get it.
No. And again,
So don't lose heart.
don't lose heart, and don't forget justice is important. I mean, it's important. It's a big deal to God. And you cannot, there are several elements of the Bible that you read, and if you can't walk away with grabbing those, justice and mercy, they're at the top. They
Well,
are
I
at the
think
top.
if we want to know a lot about justice, we could go talk to our governor.
I'm not touching that, and I'm not letting you go any further with that. So
That's a good place to end.
that's a good place to end. Well, next week we will continue. We will go with the next topic of the parable of the Pharisee and the tax collector in prayer. So we will be there next week. And if you have any questions, any comments, anything, and please let us know. We're here to help you. And I apologize for not having some safeguards in place.
Well, I would hope you would apologize.
Yeah, well, but I am looking for mercy. Thank you.
And justice.
No. Just mercy. Just mercy. Well, on behalf of Steve and I, God bless, and y'all guys have a great week.